So before anything, I just want to say a thank you to House of Beautiful Business and to Tim and Monika for the honor of sharing these thoughts with you and being part of this conversation. And an extra double thank you for bringing up this topic, which I think is a really important one. Maybe I'm a bit biased. So I'm Itai Palti. I'm an architect and urban planner using science to inform design decisions. So we take insights from neuroscience, from psychology, from cognitive science, and we integrate them into the decision-making process of how we design spaces. So my team and I work towards creating a better dialogue between people and place. And personally, this driven my perception of kind of the non-physical boundaries between person and space being very blurry, and creating an awareness of that relationship of what space is to us is part of understanding who we are ourselves and how we can shape ourselves by shaping the environment. So I want to first of all just ask the question to the audience, because this is something that everyone has a different answer to. What is a city? And I think because the city is many different things to many different people, to me that plurality means that a city is a reflection of values, a mix of individual and collective identities manifested in the way that we manipulate the environment around us. And I want to offer during this hopefully 10 minutes some context for this through science, so that we can get a good grasp of the issues at hand when we're rethinking our cities, and especially in light of the post-pandemic city. So there are a number of theories in environmental psychology and neuroscience which deal with the relationship with space, and they shine a light on the sort of mechanisms which tie us to our environment. And I want to give the example of the extended mind, because I think it's a really good one in this case. The extended mind theory says the mind isn't just in our brain, it extends out into the physical world. So usually someone might give an example like a post-it, the way we write something on a post-it, and we offset our cognitive demand for memory onto an object. I'm giving an example here to show you something similar to the post-it, but that's situated in place. This is the way that we hang things onto the door handle so that we remember to take them out when we leave the house. And in this case, we're using the door as part of our cognition to remember to do something specific in relation to how we are experiencing a space. Right, so where does this fit into what's going on and what's going to happen in the future with cities and the built environment? So I'm going to suggest that this period of extreme change will bring about a better awareness of how we experience space, simply by the fact that we can't go to some places that form part of our identity will trigger self-reflection. For example, if you assume your role as a teacher in a classroom, when the classroom is taken away, some of your identity, that part associated with this role, is taken away. I think that most listeners, most of you should be able to imagine how some of your identity or personality has been taken away simply by removing access to spaces in the city. I want to give a couple of examples of how I use the city, but how many of us knowingly and unknowingly use the city. And to show you the difference between cognition, metacognition, and the importance of the city. Cognition is how we experience the world around us, how we process information of the world around us. Metacognition is how do we process the information about ourselves. And the city plays a role, an interesting role in both of these. In creative thinking, for example, you want to think creatively, you want to come up with solutions to problems. One of the best ways to do it is to walk between different spaces that have different scales and different types of views in order to create an oscillation between internal thoughts and external attention. When we have the streets taken away from us, we have this facility taken away from us to think creatively, to solve problems. In metacognition, I'm giving an example of Kikar Rabin in Tel Aviv, and Kikar Rabin is a place that's associated with protest, with the political left, with anti-occupation, with liberal values, and it's a symbol of Tel Aviv for many people. Now, Kikar Rabin is interesting because it was designed with the design intent to allow up to 40,000 people to protest in front of City Hall. And I'm putting it next to London, Trafalgar Square, specifically because London, Trafalgar Square is the opposite of that. The fountains that you see in Trafalgar Square were installed 150 years ago to discourage protest. And so you start realizing that the way that we design our cities is really a reflection of the values. Do we allow protest? Do we allow people to have social interactions of a certain type? And we have all these choices. So there are certain aspects of that experience that we've managed to somehow mitigate and replicate in our homes. And I'm going to put that aside, and that's a whole topic in itself. But there are three things that we can't replicate at home: a dynamic spatial experience, interactions, and memory and identity, or the role of memory and identity in, just a second, I think I might have disconnected from something. The role of memory and identity in place. Just to kind of hit that point, how I'm showing you a video of a mouse going through a maze. The little things you're hearing are place cells firing in this mouse's brain. And place cells are part of how we encode memory. So our memory is a place, not just of events, but also of our identity in place, are fixed onto a geolocated point. And having those spaces taken away from us is very similar to having the ability to strengthen synapses taken away from us. We lose part of our identity because we don't have access to those spaces. Now, I just want to, so I'm going to go to my takeaway for this point. So this is a situation with heightened awareness of our relationship with space. And I want to locate a very specific point in the design process that's important to shaping any environment, but especially the post-pandemic city. And that's the point of design intent. Design intent is what we choose as the measure of success for an environment. And I'm giving you an example here of how design intent is part of the evolution of space. So it's part of the evolution of space. So in the case of something like the space we have in front of our seats in planes, in our lifetime, we see these shrinking. That's because the metric attached to it is passenger numbers and profit, and not health or comfort. But this is the same for everything. And the way that we look at spaces is completely dictated by what we can measure and the ways of measurement that we're used to. And so because of the invisible quality of the way that we experience space internally, we've neglected to create metrics that reflect human experience well. And what we've done is we've gone to metrics that are easy to go to and exist. And that means that we sometimes count the wrong things. And this is Einstein's quote, "Not everything that counts be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts." Meaning, if we don't make the important things visible and countable, we're unlikely to be able to go in that direction and improve. And what we'll end up with are the same mistakes that we had in the previous, in any city. When we put movement above experience, for example, in a street, we are depleting it of value. But if we look at human experience and look at curiosity and things that we can measure that have a very positive effect on our health and well-being, we can start creating environments that answer to those needs and don't make the city a kind of mechanical piece. And so to end this, I'm saying this is a period of unlearning. And why am I saying that? It's a big pause, what's happening now. It's a reset, and it might have immense consequences for post-pandemic city. And it's a period of unlearning. And I wasn't satisfied with the dictionary definition of unlearning, so I came up with my own. And it goes like this: intentionally setting into motion a process of change driven by a belief that the unknown may hold more value than the known. And if the post-pandemic city is one that will represent our current values and the values that will guide us to the future and evolve spaces, what we must unlearn in order to reach a better place than when we were before. We have to counter our desire to return to familiarity. And I think this is a topic that is all around in this pandemic. We all want familiarity, but we have to look at it with a critical approach and question our habits, so that when we come out of this into a post-pandemic city, we're making better decisions that are based on a better self-awareness of our relationship with space. That's me.
Great, thank you, Itai. Now you're back. Thank you. So on the topic of unlearning, if we look at the world, of course, the cities, play an essential part in preparing for and mitigating and adapting to pandemics or other crises. So some cities like Taipei or Singapore, for example, stood out despite the recent spike of cases. Others not so much. Can you talk about the future governance in light of the post-corona era of cities? Yes.
Me, governance. Okay, so governance. Again, whatever shapes our environment is part of a decision-making process. And I think that process needs to be taken apart and understood. What is the impact of each of these decisions? When it comes to governance, my personal opinion, and I think this is something that we need to be thinking about, how do we decentralize some decision making so that people's needs are better represented? What happens when a centralized body decides for a wider population is that sometimes you get a distance of values. Values aren't always very well represented by a centralized decision-making body. And so in governance, I think that is something we really need to be thinking about if we want spaces and cities that are inclusive and that guide us towards the future in the way we want them to. And they have to be conscious decisions. So it's almost like talking about a metacognition of space. We need a spatial metacognition in order to better understand how we can use it for our own good and for society's good. And that awareness has to come in governance as well.
Thank you.
I love someone was saying, I think, Robin, can you do a broader dictionary rewrite, Itai? So well, looking to you for. And there was one question that I wanted to bring in, Valeria, if you want to ask that, because I think it was interesting about the city and the values. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, Tim. Hi, Itai. I just wondered, what is your favorite city in terms of values? Like, which current city in its current form represents the best values, in your opinion?
This is tough because I'm going to come out as if like I'm, I don't have a unbiased opinion, which I guess no one does. But Tel Aviv is my favorite city. Tel Aviv is my favorite city because of its acceptance, because it's very liberal approach, because it's a place where people get to be themselves, and it's a place that is inherently social, partly because of the social fabric, but I think there is something in the way that Tel Aviv is built that creates somewhat of egalitarian approach. So you have a beach where everyone is doing the same thing. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor or whatever. Everyone is sitting on the beach, and that is a democratizing force. But I think in general, Tel Aviv has an approach to public space that really blurs the boundaries between home and city. And that creates a place that people feel very comfortable and informal in. And those are the things that I like about that city.
Thank you.